it's going to be a skill for us to distinguish ourselves from, AI slop, and some of that needs to come from our heart and who we are and our identity and our culture, and drawing on things that a computer cannot tap into. I think that's important for us as humans moving forward.
Hi, everybody. You're with Dani Valent and you're listening to Dirty Linen. Love to have your company with me for a beautiful chat about food. We are kind of used to people wearing a few different hats these days, but how about Elvin Ho? A chef, cheesemonger, food writer, food tech teacher, a dad who forages garden snails, and, if that wasn't enough, a stand-up comedian and improv artist who has a show at this year's Melbourne Fringe Festival called Gruel Intentions. Like me, Elvin believes food is a powerful way to create connection. Elvin, so happy to welcome you to Dirty Linen.
Thank you for having me on the podcast.
You do wear a few different hats. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, at the moment, the main hat I'm wearing is that of food tech teacher. So I work full-time as a teacher. But in the past, I've worked as a chef. As you said, a cheesemonger or a gourmet deli really is what it was. I've been a food writer for a while. And as you know, in that profession, you needed to be a little bit nimble when things changed and pivot and find different ways to work in the industry that we love so much. So, currently doing that and then dipping my toes back into stand-up comedy. I've had about 10 years off, but inspiration has kind of struck lately. I always go to comedy festival shows with ex-comedian friends and housemates of mine, and we always say, this is the year where we'll get back into it. We've got to do something. And no one ever really does. But I've finally found myself in a position where, life's pretty good, pretty settled in my career and happy teaching and doing what I do. But just had this idea for a show around food, as you know, with your podcast and what you do, that food is such a great connector of people and bringing different people together to find joy and meaning with each other. So I thought this would be a great topic for a show. So all written and raring to go.
Wow, amazing. Well, I reckon, if I think about some of the most terrifying experiences you could have in life, for me, one of them would definitely be standing up in front of a room full of people and trying to make them laugh. But then I think about being a food tech teacher and standing in front of a room full of high school students and trying to keep them engaged for an hour. I feel like if you can do that, you probably feel like you can do anything.
Well, that's it. So for the past 7 years, I've been teaching, and I don't think there's really any tougher crowd than a bunch of teenagers who are pretty easily distractible and, on their devices and that sort of thing. So I think that's, while I haven't been on the stage, teaching is pretty much performative, and you need to keep kids entertained, engaged, find meaning and connection with their lives to make sure that what you're teaching them is grounded and they can actually apply in their real life. That's why food tech teaching, I've found a real comfort with it, because it's so meaningful and relevant for students. It's practical, it's hands-on, they're doing something, they're learning. It's not as abstract as some of the things we often do in the classroom where they don't get to taste something, delicious at the end of the class. So, that's been a great experience for me.
I love to hear it. I mean, tell us, give us a little social or snapshot, from your experience in those food tech rooms. What do you notice with the kids? Like, what are their concerns? You mentioned they're distractible on their devices. Like, what are the sort of good things and tough things that you see teenagers negotiating these days?
Yeah, I think at the moment, the main thing is for them to find meaning in their learning and relevance and something they can apply in their real world and their lives. They're disconnected with a lot of the classroom-based, worksheets, the traditional stuff of PowerPoint presentations and reading and writing. It's a whole new world for them, and they're great on these devices and digitally and creating content and consuming content. But I think they're really crying out for softer skills where they work more collaboratively in teams. They work on their social connection. So much of it now, I think, is mediated through screens and devices and social media that they've kind of lost a little bit of the human touch, which is where cooking, I think, comes in, because they have to be off screens, they have to be working together, they have to be collaborating, they have to be communicating with each other to meet an end goal of creating this dish. And I think that's the beauty of it. And you sneak so much numeracy in there in cooking with measuring ingredients and quantities and fractions and that sort of thing. There's a lot of science involved. There's literacy because you're reading and following an instruction and sometimes writing a recipe. So there's lots of different elements to it. And, kids really look forward to the cooking classes, the practical cooking classes where they're doing something, as opposed to the theory classes, because I typically have the classes for 2 hours, 1 hour's theory, 1 hour's practical. And the theory is a bit of a drainer and a bit of a drag for them. But all through the week, what are we cooking next week, Elvin? What are we cooking? What are we cooking? And sometimes, you hit the mark, and sometimes, they might complain about something, but at least they're, being exposed to lots of different cuisines and different foods and cultures. So that's been a great thing for them, I think.
And do you see those possibilities for food to connect across culture and across perhaps, I don't know, differences of opinion in other arenas? Do you see that in the classroom?
Absolutely, yeah. As an example, my year 10s, this past semester, we had an assessment task where they had to design like a cultural recipe that was meaningful to them. And I work in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, so very culturally diverse. Lots of students from Arabic backgrounds, Turkey, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, the proportion of Macedonian, Greek, Sri Lankan, Indian, Vietnamese, like the whole gamut. So in that class, very ethnically diverse, and they had to design a recipe from their own culture, present it to the class, and the whole class had to cook it as well after they'd talked about it as, what it means to them as their when they were growing up, and then share that with the class. And that's been a great way for students to connect and break down the cultural barriers, because often in this sort of class, the Syrian kids would stick together and the Vietnamese kids would stick together. But this has been such a great way where students can learn about each other and each other's culture, and kind of realize that we're all more alike than different, really. Like, there's a Syrian edged dish, which is kind of like an omelette to everyone else, or, Iranian sheer berenj, which is a sweet rosewater infused rice pudding, was similar to congee from, my Chinese culture, and similar to porridge and that sort of thing. So we were able to make all these links that, brought us all together and made us realize that while we're from such different backgrounds, we're all, quite similar in many ways. And our food arrives at similar destinations. Yeah. I have to be careful not to, offend people. The one Syrian girl was talking about shawarma and how beautiful that was. And I was like, oh, it's pretty much similar to a sandwich, isn't it? And then she got very upset and said, oh, it's not like a sandwich at all. And then talked about what it meant to her and her family and all the different flavors. And I was put in my place, but it was just such a great topic of conversation where they're so passionate about it, and they can bring so much of themselves, and we can have these healthy debates about food. I mean, part of the show's genesis is seeing, quite a lot of hate and division out there along cultural lines, and I just think food is such a great uniter and connector, and I think you appreciate that as well.
Well, I'm endlessly optimistic about the power of food to create connection, and as you say, show us where we are similar, as well as, to celebrate or decode our differences. Elvin, if you had that assignment to bring a dish that was important to you and your cultural story, what would you bring?
I think for me, it would definitely be Lo Sang or Yi Sang, which is a Chinese Malaysian New Year dish. It's called like the prosperity toss salad. So I've been doing that for my big family gathering Chinese New Year's every year for the last 10 years or so. So it involves it's not hard, but it's a lot of work. It's a couple of days' work. So, a couple of days before, you fry off some wonton skin wrappers, some taro, which has been julienned and dyed green and red as great colours of the festive season. Then closer to the day, you julienne some carrot, daikon. There's this yam bean, coriander, and have some raw salmon. And there's a great sauce that goes with it. And you put it on these big platters. And when I do it, I make about 4 or 5 platters because we have a big gathering of 20 or 30 people, and everyone gets armed with chopsticks. And then at the appropriate time, we all dive in and mix the salad together. And the old aunties and uncles, my mum and her sisters and brothers, will offer the good luck proverbs, and I don't know what they're saying. I typically, throw in a few, go Carlton or some footy references, hoping that we have a good season, that sort of thing. So it's just a bit chaotic and a little bit messy, but it brings the generations together and speaks so much of, connects us back to our Malaysian culture, I think, yeah.
Love that. And yeah, you must have tossed your salad nice and high this year because Carlton's had a few wins. So I'm glad. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, we've turned it around. Yeah, that's one of the things too. The higher you toss, you bring the salad and drop it, the better luck apparently the year ahead.
Yeah, love that. So, even just in that anecdote, you've shown how sort of transposable these cultural traditions are, these culinary traditions are, that, you can apply this Malaysian Chinese salad toss to Aussie rules football, which I love. That's so much part of the Australian story, I reckon. But why is it that you think food has this power to bring people together, to create connection?
I think it's just part of being human. Like when I'm teaching, I talk a lot about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and theories of motivation. And right at the very bottom, if we're stranded on a desert island, the first things we need are, food and shelter, warmth, water, those sorts of things. So it's kind of elemental to who we are that without food, you can't become a person. You can't worry about romantic relationships or friendships or self-identity or who you are as a person without having those very basic needs met. So I think that's why it's such a great connector and such great fodder for a comedy show, because I think everyone can find something they relate to that's relevant to them, that they've experienced. And we all have to eat if we're going to survive. And it's such a great topic of conversation. Very, as I said before, kids get very passionate about what they like and what they dislike. And I think that's a great skill for us to have, where we can argue in a civil and respectful manner. There's so much, hate being thrown around that, we want to cancel each other. But I think food's, as silly as it sounds, it's something where we can disagree on, but still be amazing friends and be human around that. So I think that's why it's such a powerful vehicle, as I think you know.
Love that. So, Elvin, how do you then go and make it funny? How do you turn it into a comedy show? Tell us a bit about Gruel Intentions.
Yeah, well, I guess obviously the pun title being Cruel Intentions, the late 90s movie, and gruel being a notoriously a bit of a poor man's food, but in Oliver Twist, that's seen as something that slopped out to the poor orphans. But for me, it's congee. Effectively, it's the rice porridge, the Chinese rice porridge, which is something that my mum would give to me when I was sick or had a sniffle or had a broken arm. Congee was going to fix everything. It was that magical elixir, like chicken soup for more Western palates, I guess. So I talk a lot at the start about my upbringing coming from a Chinese background. I was born in England, of all places, but my mum's Malaysian, my dad's Mauritian, my grandparents are from China. And talk about those cultural roots of me growing up. I guess my mum would always have a saying around meal times that, sorry if this comes across crass on the podcast, but if you didn't eat all your food, it was going to get shoved up your backside. So me and my brother would eat lots and lots, and, that was never an issue for us. So talking about those silly cultural things growing up, and then my life, through schooling, and I always loved food as a kid, and ended up being, the second fattest kid in grade 4, which, the teacher unfortunately let everyone know, because we did a bar graph, weighing ourselves and putting that up in front of all the kids, and that you wouldn't be caught dead doing that now, with all the issues around eating. But back then in the mid 80s, that was seen as a good learning experience, and obviously quite powerful to me now, because I was, picked on for being one of the fat kids and that sort of thing. So trying to find humour in the tragedy, as many comedians do, is where it comes from. And then I did work as a chef for about 5 years, and after I left government and corporate work, and kitchens, as you know through your podcast, are rife with stories of interesting characters, and you meet all sorts of people that you wouldn't in any other aspect of life, really. It's a real hodgepodge melting pot of different characters that arrive in a kitchen. And so talking about some of the stories with quintessential angry chefs, and how they run their kitchens and mistreat their staff, but also the joy that comes from cooking and meeting different people, and having these different experiences. So tell a lot of stories through my comedy of chef life, and working at a food retailer, and then working as a food tech teacher, and just my love of food, and hopefully that comes out in the show.
Well, you'll have to tell us a story, Elvin. Like, I don't know, I don't mind which part of your life it's from. I guess we've got the uneaten food up the derriere story, so we can probably leave that one. But what is another anecdote that you can share with us from your days in all these different food worlds?
Yeah, I guess being a parent now, my kids are 12 and 15, and I try and infuse my love of food and my passion in them as well, and cook with them lots as well. So I remember I was a stay-at-home dad for a few years, and my wife, she's a GP, a doctor, and one day I just got it in my head that, because it was the middle of winter and there were lots of snails out in the garden, and I thought maybe we should forage some snails, because I'd watched an episode of Maeve O'Meara's Food Safari, is it, I think? And she went out into the Hunter Valley and talked to a snail producer, and apparently they're just like your garden variety snails that they harvest and grow. So yeah, we had lots of fruit trees, and all of a sudden it was wet, and there were like just hundreds of snails in our front garden. And I thought, kids, this is our activity for the day. We're going to collect up some snails. And we did that, and put them in these plastic tubs and brought them into the house. And the idea was to kind of purge them. So we'd feed them oats and polenta, and then they would, do their poos and clean themselves out, and then starve them for a little while. And then we could, grill them with some garlic and parsley butter. That was my idea, classic French kind of dish. But obviously my wife got home at about 5 o'clock and saw me and the kids playing inside with about 100 snails, and she wasn't very happy. And she's seen the horror stories, of course, being a doctor. I mean, there's a tragic tale of a teenager being dared to eat a slug and then ending up paralyzed and then passing away. And she was just mortified by what I was doing with our 3 and 5 year old kids, and had to let them go back into the garden. So yeah, she wasn't very happy with me that day. So the joke is I went back into my shell, of course, and had to make it up to her by taking her to Loon croissanterie because her croissants are her favourite pastry. But mine, of course, are escargots. So that's that's the punchline there.
I love it. Well, I reckon definitely that's worth the ticket price alone. Yeah, and I mean, I wonder, what would have happened, and would those snails have cooked up just, deliciously? I guess when you're eating snails French style, the main thing you can taste is the garlic and the butter. Yeah, I was recently in Vietnam, and there's a lot of snail dishes around, soups and stews, and a very popular ingredient. But I've got to say, I didn't actually wonder, who'd foraged them or where they'd come from. But yeah, I mean, honestly, there's so much protein just like slithering around or walking around our country. There's a lot of alternative sources of nutrition that we probably should be considering, and perhaps garden snails are among it.
Possibly, probably pretty sustainable and, regenerate reasonably quickly. And it might be a way of the future. Might take some convincing, the Australian palate. I did have snails the other day, actually, at the European. They had it as a garnish on a tongue dish, which was pretty amazing. First time I've kind of seen it in Australia, but that was pretty impressive, I thought.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. Well, I reckon possibly all of the snails that we eat in Australia in restaurants are imported in cans. So please, somebody message me and correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it's another one of those things that we probably could source locally. But anyway, I was going to say we could go down a rabbit hole, but perhaps it's down some sort of snail trail. So, Elvin, you mentioned you were a chef for 5 years. That's a pretty interesting career to sort of, steer yourself towards after corporate life. What was it that drew you there?
Yeah, well, working as a suit and working in government departments and in corporate, it was pretty stressful. And I found that you would finish a day and not really feel that you'd achieved anything or affected any change. And it was, I don't know, maybe a bit of an existential kind of thing that what am I doing with my life? But I would always go home and cook, and that would de-stress me, and I would just love it so much and love bringing either my housemates or relatives or whoever around and bonding around that, and just found that as such a great outlet for me, and such a creative thing as well, and very tangible, and just loved that so much that eventually I thought, why don't I do this as a job? I'm enjoying it so much every night that I entered the world of, kitchens after that. So it's a big leap. Obviously, this was mid 2000s, I think 2005 or 6 or something like that. Kind of before the MasterChef revolution, I think. But I think in my head I had romanticized it a little bit. But, back then I was, working in the government earning maybe 70 grand a year, and then you go to apprentice wages of $10 an hour. So it was a big drop. But my first job on the day in a little gastro pub type place was picking parsley, and that was just the greatest thing in the world. And just being hands on and involved with it, and the smells and the sights, and being involved in that bustling, vibrant environment was just a joy. Like I wouldn't do it again now. I'm 20 years older. But at the time, you just feel so alive in a kitchen, really. You're under a lot of pressure. It's stressful, but you're doing something. You can finish a day and say, today I peeled 10 carrots and 5 onions and picked however many leaves of parsley, and it just felt like you were achieving something, like that you were doing something with your life, as simple as it was. And I think something very human about it as well, as we touched on before, that feeding people and just taps into something within us that's quite natural. And I think that's kind of what I've gravitated towards in my later careers, that cooking, that, humans thousands of years ago had to do that, and telling stories like I do with my stand-up. And what you do with your podcast and your journalism work is telling stories. And there's something very human about that, that we've been doing that for millennia, and teaching as well, I think is kind of a natural thing that seems to bring a lot of joy and meaning to my life, and being able to connect with others through those professions has been wonderful.
Do you think that there are a lot of other professions or tendencies in contemporary life that are not so much geared to that connection, to those sort of, I guess, old-fashioned skills or practices, such as, feeding one another or teaching one another?
It's possible. I mean, we're going through this AI revolution now, and I'm trying to teach my students about the world that confronts them, and it's a bit. It's hard. It's hard. I don't know. As the old saying goes, the jobs that they do haven't been created yet. I mean, how you wouldn't have thought of podcasting was a job, many years ago. And these things that have emerged, the futures for them are looking a little bit unclear and murky. And I think that's why there's a disconnect between current education systems and students at the moment, because they can't see how they're going to apply this textbook learning to their future careers. That's why I'm big on, food tech and the softer skills of communication, interacting, having social and emotional intelligence, creativity and critical thinking, because there's so much information that's coming to us that we have to, in a split second, figure out whether it's real or it's AI or it's fake or whatnot, and interpret these things. So that's what I'm, really trying to do with my students, just kind of AI proof them a little bit and get them comfortable with the uncertainty that's coming their way. Just hammering home these, I'm getting you to speak in front of people or with people or work with different people purposively, or with purpose, I should say, that it's just not random, that these are the skills that are going to hold you in good stead in the future, because, the immediate default to their screens is something that's, is concerning, I guess. And I see that with my own kids as well, as 12 and 15-year-olds, that I try as much as possible to get them out and about. And it's, just having different experiences, be that at restaurants or live comedy gigs, or going to see museums and galleries and that sort of thing, just to get them experiencing the real world. Because not that, what's happening online and that's not the real world, that kind of is their real world. It's almost an extension of themselves now, which is why it's so hard to wrest away their devices, I think. So being empathetic to that as well. I think if I was a teenager now, I don't think it's really ever been harder to be a teenager with so many pressures on them and, influencers telling them they should be this to be prettier or healthier or happier or bigger, or, these looks maxes and all these things. I guess we didn't have to contend with that. Our sense of identity and who we are was formed a bit more organically, I guess, without so much pressure that we had to meet certain levels or expectations of what society thinks. And so it's a whole new world out there, isn't it?
It's a lot. I mean, I guess there are things that we're happy to leave behind, like, the grade 4s being ranked in order of fatness. And then there are things that, just seem overwhelming and concerning and extremely hard to navigate. I do think it's a super hard time to be a teenager, let alone a human in general. But let's I guess talk about this idea a little bit more about, food as a connector, and, what do you see in your, all the different forums in which you work and live around food and the way that its possibilities for making the world a better place?
Yeah, I think, as I said with that year 10 example, just being open-minded and exploring other people's cuisines opens up insight into who they are as people. And traveling, I think, will be a great thing. I know you've recently been in Vietnam, and you'd just get such a greater appreciation of those people just by being there and seeing them and realizing that we're all part of the same human race, and we all have that same hopes and desires. And I think, there's some great hope there. And I hope with food that people can see each other's cuisines and taste it, and overcome previous barriers potentially.
I think, some people would see that as naive, but I think it's naivety that's going to get us through. It's going to take us forward. Just like simple and profound ideas are really, I think they're what we need. Like an openness to, understanding, well, if that's not okay to call that shawarma a sandwich, then, what is it and what does it mean? And, show me a new way to appreciate it and to, sit beside you and share it and understand more about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Elvin, as we've started by saying you do so many different things, like, why do you do what you do?
I think I listened to your podcast recently with Shannon Martinez, and I think in hospitality and in comedians, we've all got a little bit of a screw loose that like we enter these professions which no rational person would really if they thought about it, but there's something about the connection and the joy and being creative and doing something that I guess others might relate to and respond to that draws us towards those things. And it's one of those things that I was compelled to do when I became a chef, and then getting back into comedy. And I'm, not saying I want to necessarily become a professional comedian, but there was a show there that I wanted to share with people and present. I think it's hard to say. It's just something that you need to do at a certain point in your life. And definitely something about the creativity must be core to what I am as a human being and what I try and instill in my students and my children, that there's so much that's, if talking about this AI stuff that just can get regenerated or recreated at the click of a button, that it's going to be a skill for us to distinguish ourselves from, AI slop. And some of that needs to come from our heart and who we are and our identity and our culture, and drawing on things that a computer cannot tap into. I think that's important for us as humans moving forward.
Well, if I think about a thread between all the different things that you do, Elvin, it's like you're in a room with people. You're like a 3D breathing, warm body with, a backstory, thoughts, feelings, and ideas. And I guess, that's there can never be enough of that. It's I wish you all the best with the show, and certainly all the best with those year 10s, keeping them engaged. So Gruel Intentions is on as part of Melbourne Fringe. It's on from the 28th of September to the 4th of October. We will put a link to tickets in the show notes. Elvin, thank you so much for sharing with us today. Keep tossing that salad high, and wishing all the best to the Blues.
Thanks so much, Dani.
Thank you.
See ya.
This is Dirty Linen. I'm Dani Valent. We bring you untold stories from the food world. Real, raw, unafraid, hopeful. We're driven by a belief that food provides endless opportunities for learning, connecting, and creating the world we want to live in. Delicious, open-hearted, meaningful. If you know a story that needs telling, get in touch. Write to dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au. Thank you for listening.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.